What's the most helpful thing that you have done for yourself during this quarantine? Like, what has made the biggest positive difference for you?
Um, Losing attachment to any sense that I should know what I'm doing, do know what I'm doing, that there is any form of right answer in any of this, and that I need to kind of drive myself to stay positive. I think just taking away all of that,
Hmm.
just taking away any performance aspect to it. Like, you know me well, you know I have a slight competitive edge. And so and I'm normally super competitive with myself. So it's all
Yeah.
about driving myself to do better things, do more things, do them, And so losing all of that and just going, this is a big old mess, isn't it? Oh, well, do your best, that'll do.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Might Help, Can't Hurt, Conversations with Leaders, Doers, and Friends. And we are very much in improvisatory mode today, but my fellow improviser is a longtime friend and business manager and generally one of the sanest people I know, Michelle Walder. So welcome, Michelle.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Is that, I was trying to figure out if you were going to take that as a compliment or an insult, being one of the sanest people I know.
Neither.
Neither. See, there you go. You just kind of take it in your stride. Kind of the only proper answer for that. So we're going to get the political thing over with, just because right now, as we're recording live, even though many people won't be hearing this live, this morning's news was in America that Biden has just taken leads in Georgia, Pennsylvania, and I think and Arizona. He already had leads in it. Anyways, that he's taken the lead properly for the first time. How is this being reported over there? Because here it's just nonstop. The sky is falling. The sky is falling.
Relatively sanguinely, I would have said. So unfortunately, we have CNN on nonstop. So we watch it in the American style, losing our minds, super impressed at how John King is still steady and stable and doesn't seem to get animated about anything after 4 solid days. But yeah, in the press, they pick up on it and they do Trump's latest lawsuit and say what the outcome of it was. And yeah, it's there, but it's not there. It's no more there than COVID is there.
Right. Okay. So yeah. So we haven't. I actually guess that probably Trump would be a bit disappointed because I think he does like the coverage. So I mean, that it's getting pushed out of the headlines. That's no good. No. So well, interesting times, which is in fact how this entire show came about, was just meeting back up with old friends in interesting times. And I was trying to remember the year we met, and I thought, was it 2004?
Yeah, so we met the year I set up TXG, didn't we? So yeah, 2004, so over 15 years ago now. Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. And yet neither of us has changed a bit.
No grey hairs, definitely.
Oh. So what are you seeing in so okay, I'm going to do a bad job of describing what you do, and then you're going to do a good job of correcting me and explaining what you actually do, and that's going to be the basis from which I'm going to ask you a question about business. So, as I understand what Michelle does after 15 years, it's like an executive coach placement firm. So when a company needs qualified coaching for their executives, for their teams, they go to Michelle's company, TXG, and she places the best coach for that company in that place. And that, I would assume, gives you some fairly good insight into the state of mind of the different companies that you're working with. How did you?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Cool. So that, yeah. Well, so then the question for me is, what have you noticed over the course of COVID? Like, has it been consistent company to company, or is it literally just everyone's dealing with this in a very their own way?
No, I think there's certainly been some themes that I think are consistent between companies. And I think what's been very interesting for me is the way the relationship between employer and employee has really shifted over the period of time at the start of COVID to even now, because of course in the UK we're back in lockdown again, so everyone's back working from home again. So I've kind of got March to compare with November as two different experiences. And I think there's always been a fear among senior people in organizations, or at least a lot of the ones I've met, about what would happen if you didn't have this illusion of control over your people, like you didn't know what time they were turning up and you didn't know exactly what they were working on. And it's been really interesting that I think the relationship has shifted now. And I think people did amazing things over the course of being locked in their homes with their children not at school, and broadly stepped up to the plate. And so I think there's a lot of introspection in organizations at the moment around, well, what does that mean for us going forwards, and what level of flexibility are we going to give people? And it shifted something in the power dynamic of the relationship, which is, well, if everyone's going to do this for a reason other than us trying to make them through rules and processes, what does that actually mean for the way that we engage with them? I think is something that's thematic. And then the other thing that really struck me is that this is not the time for the tough guys. Like the leaders who have got loyalty and who are engaging with their employees in a way that has kindness and respect in it, even very, very senior people, is making a really big difference to how people are showing up now in terms of levels of flexibility, things they're willing to try, changes they'll make, things they'll do, compared to, you know, the tough guys I think have had a really difficult experience with their own employees just not being engaged with them at all. So I think there's a leadership aspect to it as well as a
right. And do you have a sense? I'm asking you to speculate, counselor, but I don't know. What, you were a barrister. What did they call you? Did they call you counselor?
No, I trained. I never.
Okay.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
All right. Well, so where do you see it going? Like, let's say that on January 1st, a reliable vaccine has come through, and people are safely able to have the option of returning to the old normal. To what extent do you think that's the direction of travel?
Yeah, and I think this is really variable. So I think at the one end, you've got organizations who are like, I'm never going to have an office again. We don't need one. And at the other, you've got people pushing to go, the second we can, everybody back to the office, and we'll just pretend this never happened. And I suspect neither of those is quite right. Partly because there's a level of flexibility people are used to, but actually more importantly, I think it's going to be very difficult to have absolutely no contact between people if you want to do certain things. And the things that for me don't work remotely as well are group activities where you want to go deep. I think that can be quite challenging for organizations. Creativity, I think, is a problem. Like how you bounce things around when you're doing it in these sorts of formats. But also, I have no idea what it means for any business which works on any form of apprenticeship model. So if you're, I was just talking to a client of mine in the investment business in private equity, and their associate class started in August, and they've never been in the office, they've never met anybody, they don't overhear anything, they're not learning, they're not building relationships, they're only interacting directly with the people they're interacting with. And I think there's a real challenge as to, one, how desirable that is if you're 24 years old and that's your experience of the workplace, but also how realistic that is in terms of getting them up the curve. So I think there's merit in going back, but I can't see that everyone's going to suddenly want to do 24 hours a day like they used to based out of an office.
Yeah, I mean, well, and also here there's been a migration, right? People are moving out of the cities. They're moving, based on the idea, I assume, that either they will be able to work remotely or they won't, but they don't care. They would rather not live in that, in the city. So it'll be interesting to see if there's a return to the cities in the same way.
Yeah, and I have a lot of clients in New York as well as in London and other cities, and I agree that that's a thing, isn't it? People are going, all of the things that make living in a city great are actually not even possible at the moment. But that, again, will shift. And I wonder, I mean, I think maybe the bigger question for me is how many people will simply choose to do something completely different. So opt out in inverted commas and go, this isn't what I signed up for. Because I think there's lots of people really assessing what their life is about and also having to face maybe aspects of themselves or learn about themselves the way that they've had to before. Are you being attacked?
Yeah, this house is a pretty big house, and I've had to move out of my office for today. And the dogs have decided that they were going to move out with me, and they've decided that they're actually going to have a full-on fight about 3 feet to my right. So while this is by design sort of more casual than your typical podcast, we don't necessarily hold ourselves to that same professional standard as other shows. I'm doing a really good job mostly hearing what you're saying as I watch my two favorite dogs play Rock'em Sock'em Robots with each other. Just.
But this is the humanity of working like this, isn't it? You get to engage with people in the whole of their lives, with their dogs and half the time their babies and heaven knows what. I think that's one of the nice aspects of it. You feel like you know people in a different, I mean, not you and I, because we would always have engaged like this, people who it's hard to maintain a kind of pretense of seniority and competence, isn't it?
What was the clip? This was pre-COVID, but there was this gorgeous clip. I think it was like a British newsreader who was reporting from his home, and the baby crawled in.
Oh, it was amazing. It was an program, wasn't it? Was it not a news in Hong Kong or something? I know
something like that. And then like the nanny crawled in to grab the baby.
It's all life,
that's sort of everybody's life right now.
Yeah. Although they did a follow-up to that. I don't know if you saw it, where he actually did an entire program with the baby.
Right.
He made a virtue of it and just went, just because you've already met him or her once, here we go again. I think he did it with his whole family or something.
Oh, I mean, there's been a lot of that. It does seem to me like, while some families, I think, probably are more likely to kill each other, there's been a lot of return to closeness. We certainly experienced it here, having the girls move back for a bit. It's been kind of nice in that sense. I mean, it's always a little dodgy talking about the the good bits of a pandemic, but the reality is, for most of us, most of the time, we're dealing with the fallout, not the illness.
Yeah, and we're in these really lucky positions, aren't we, where we're not worried about, whether we're going to be able to have a job tomorrow or afford to feed our children. Yeah. So I agree. It's a cosseted world where we have the luxury of being able to take the learning from it without the danger piece of it, isn't it? But I think particularly for me, a lot of the guys I work with felt really strongly about that home aspect. Like a lot of the women I work with were just super stressed, right? Because they had to look after their children and homeschool them and do everything and still hold down a job. But a lot of the guys were talking about having a better connection, like eating with their children, things they wouldn't do. One of the people I work with are really senior and they travel a lot. And, as soon as you take away the travel and you take away the long hours, or you're at home whilst you're doing the long hours, really change the way they interact with their kids. And I think there's some reluctance to move away from that again. I heard a lot of CEOs feel really strongly about, I missed out on watching my two eldest children, and actually watching this one and having dinner every night's really nice. Yeah.
Well, I gave talks in the last 2 weeks at a conference in Spain and a conference in Toronto, and I've got one coming up in Dublin, and I've done them all from my office. And it is I know what that trip would have been like, if I was actually showing up. And there is something quite nice about it. I do miss humans in that sense, but there are trades. So, okay, I'm going to go slightly sideways.
Oh.
One of the things you mentioned was that there will be people, and probably a lot of younger people, kind of going, do I really want to go into that kind of a work environment? Having now had a sense of this, I remember when I talked to my brother over at Google, he said the interesting thing, that the knock-on effect of the way people learn to work at Google, which was intense hours but a lot of freedom, is none of them wanted real jobs afterwards. like they wanted other companies were having to become more googly to attract the talent that had gotten their start at Google. But for people who are kind of looking to strike out on their own, I know that partly through my business, but you've helped a lot of people, worked with a lot of people who are trying to become solopreneurs, who are trying to set up on their own. What have you seen? Nothing to do with COVID particularly, but like what have you seen in that arena that when you meet somebody lets you know, oh, they're likely to do quite well at this, or ooh, they might want to reconsider?
It's a good question. So the ones that always make me nervous when they tell me that they're going to set up on their own are the people who at some level I think are trying to escape something. Like either I don't like the workplace or they're already carving out loads of bits of the business that they don't want to do. So I really want to do this, but I don't want to do marketing and I don't want to understand the figures. All of that kind of makes me go, oh, okay, so you want an organization, you just want a different job. Because part of the point of going out on your own is, yes, you can hire brilliant people to help you do things, but fundamentally the decisions sit with you. And I think that can be really intimidating for some people. And then others are completely liberated by that. They're like, great, I'm in control of my own environment, my own choices. And if I get them wrong, so be it, but at least they're mine. I'm not at somebody else's behest. But yes, I think that would be my biggest flag. Another big flag is people who think they're going to make a ton of money really easily, really quickly.
In my spare time, from the comfort of my couch.
Yeah, exactly. And I think maybe people who have, how do I put this? I think people who struggle with a lack of stability or a lack of security, that always makes me nervous, because I think it's more mentally overwhelming to have your own business than I think anyone really realizes until you do it. Like I always think if you knew what it was like, you'd never do it, right? It's just, you have to almost not understand what you're going into to think it's a good idea to go into it, in my experience. But then it becomes fun, and then it becomes what you do, but it's still in the back of your mind. I remember that horrible realization that if I didn't do X, Y, Z, somebody else was not going to get paid, and that was literally on me. Right. I was the only one doing that particular thing at the time that was bringing in and I remember sort of having to really get my head around that as a sense of responsibility for others, way above a team that used to be 3 times the size that I used to manage when I had a proper job. But so I think so. And the people who are going to do well at it, I think the people who can find fun in anything. Like if you're one of the people who can show up for something regardless of what it is and try and see the good in it and see the excitement in it and find it enjoyable even when it's going wrong, then that's pretty good quality to have, I think, to set up your own thing.
I remember one of my mentors, his son-in-law approached him and said he was going to set up his own business, and and I forget what the questions were, but one of the questions was that he asked him was, well, what are your concerns? And I said, well, I just, my biggest concern is I really need stable income. Exactly. I said, you really don't want to set up. That's his expression that he used again and again at the point where it became famous in my head was like complaining about unstable income when you're out on your own working is like a busboy complaining about too many dishes. That's the gig. That's how it works.
Yeah, that's the point of it, in a way.
Yeah. Is there such a thing? And I'm sure there must be, but I'm wondering if maybe you know more about it as a trend rather than just the odd example of creating like entrepreneurial teams within a larger organization. So kind of trying to split that difference where you're giving people more of that sense of being out on their own, but within the security and stability of a company umbrella.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's linked to that sort of thing that Google did, isn't it? Which is a certain amount of time is dedicated to something you're interested in. I think that's where Google Maps came from, wasn't it? It was one of the consent projects. And you do see that in some clients. They do that in financial services a little bit when they want to set up new product areas. They'll often put a team together and go, okay, off you guys go work out how to do this, go create, go scope the market, go decide. And other businesses I've seen it. I think what it doesn't replicate, though, is that sense that it's on you.
Yeah, the wire.
Which is, of course, what I think propels people.
Yeah, they've now found something else to attack. Oh my God, I'm watching them destroy another human. No, stop! I don't know. They're just doing their thing.
As long as it's not another of your animals, that's all that really bothers me. It's not your kitten.
I think my cat could take them both in a fight if it came down to it.
But that's what I say about creativity. Yeah. When I'm talking earlier about some of the COVID challenges of creativity, that's part of the thing, which is, if you believe the research that, Matthew Syed and others have done on diversity and different opinions in a situation, you'll get a better output to a complex problem if you have more inputs into it that are variable. And I think that is something that is missing. And I think that's what those...
Say that again different, the variables thing. I didn't follow that.
So there's a body of research carried out by many different people, some guys in the US who do it, who are looking at what's the actual reason that you would want diversity in your decision making of any description. So diversity of race, gender, background, intelligence, but also kind of thinking styles, decision making, processing, all of that kind of stuff. Yeah. And the logic goes that if you have an easy problem to solve, then one input is fine. So if your only metric is how quickly you can run 100 meters, then that's the only thing you need to focus on. It doesn't really matter about, or a relay is 400 meters. It doesn't matter about diversity in that team. You just want your 4 quickest runners.
Right.
Theoretically. Whereas when we're doing complex problems, like most work problems are, or new ideas, or how do we build something or grow it, then there's a whole set of research which shows that the more diverse the inputs you have into that problem-solving process, the better the outcome you're going to get to, the more creative the outcome, the more different things you're going to consider as part of that process. So basically, if we have a business problem, then it's better if we get 5 of us looking at it than 2 of us looking at it. And ideally, those 5 will come from different places, different perspectives, and see the world differently, right. See different things. And this has been famously done in the UK with some of the teams looking at, the Olympics. And it's been done in sport a lot, where you don't just look at cycling experts to look at cycling. You build a body which has got, soccer experts and rugby experts as well, because they all do different things. And I think that's one of the things that those entrepreneurial teams are trying to do, isn't it? They're not really entrepreneurial within an organization. They're really trying to be creative within an organization and come up with a new idea or a new way of doing something. And so there's some quite interesting stuff out of London Business School on that, about how you create a team deliberately to try and make it so that it's got the best chance of coming up with a creative, clever output in terms of new ideas. And I think that's the bit where, going back to your other question about entrepreneurs and what makes them successful, I think, there are examples, of course there are, of people who've done it entirely by themselves. But I suspect one of the things that good entrepreneurs do is they look for people who've got expertise in a thing they don't and try and bring it into the mix in their thinking.
Yeah.
I think, without looking for
yeah, no, that makes sense. And I mean, I can kind of, it's probably a little bit, I could see that thing, that there's something about the multiple inputs that just stops you from getting stuck in one way of thinking about it. They don't even need to be great. They just need to be genuinely different. And then you suddenly can kind of get a more of a 360 view of things than, which makes.
There's a book by a woman called Caroline Criado Perez, which is about data, and it's all this stuff around how women are systematically disadvantaged by things that are designed by men and situations that, stuff that, is interesting. But the example of that really jumps out is they rebuilt a village, I think in India somewhere, and they had no women on the village rebuilding design group.
Right.
Expression that. Anyway, they ended up building the kitchens. They ended up building these houses, rebuilding them without kitchens. And nobody noticed, because in that particular village, the men didn't do the cooking in the main. And I think things like that are really fascinating, aren't they? That if you don't have multiple inputs, you may not even be asking the really obvious question that someone else could ask in a nanosecond.
Yeah. So now you're a non-exec director at a couple of big organizations, Brighton Albion, Brighton Hove, Brighton Hove Albion. Okay, I was there you go. Football club, which for those of you in America is soccer, but it's a ball, there are feet. Football does work as a description. I'll just point that out. And with the Hay Festival, and there's another one that I can't remember right now.
I chair a charity called the Migraine Trust.
Okay, so I'm gonna just talk. You know me by now. Anybody who's listening who doesn't know me will know me in a minute. But like, I don't know if did you feel like you were brought on because you were a woman, because they needed a woman? And if so, was that cool with you?
I don't think I was brought on because I was a woman. Wasn't brought on.
Well, Michelle, in these gender fluid times, I
exactly.
make bold statements.
You forgot to mention when we met. So I don't think I was explicitly in any of those situations, and indeed, certainly, yeah. I'm just thinking. Actually, I was about to make a sweeping statement about. Anyway. Yeah, so I'm the only woman on the board at Brighton, and I am one of 4 women on the Migraine Trust. So, there's diversity there, and then Hay has a female chair as well. Would it be cool with me if I had been brought on because I was a woman? Controversially, I'm going to say yes, it would be cool with me. And because I find all this stuff about everything it's a pure meritocracy, and we're supposed to do everything purely on merit. I just find it a little bit challenging to believe, because I don't believe that every single board that's been full of white men for 100 years was because they were the absolute best people for it at the time. That doesn't seem right to me. So I think, and I think diversity is a good thing on all sorts of levels. I think representation is a good thing on all sorts of levels. Yeah. And so, all things being equal, great, always. But equally, if someone said, you know what, I think just for the sake of having a woman on this board, we should have a woman on this board, I'd go, okay, why not?
Yeah. And do you have a chance to, mentor other women in business through the work that you're doing? Is that sort of part of what you look at, or do you kind of look at it more as a meritocracy? I want to work with the best people and whatever they happen to be.
Yeah, in an ideal world, it would be both, wouldn't it? You'd have the best people that was from a diverse pool. I mean, I just simply don't believe until we've got representation through businesses that looks like the population, frankly, that we're there, are we? So we've still got lots to do. So I do mentoring of people, and I do supporting people in all sorts of settings through those roles. Yeah, and I think bringing on talent and helping, I'm kind of, look at what we do for a living, right? I'm pretty big on the idea that we want to maximize everybody's potential and help them achieve whatever that potential is. And so, yeah, and I'm actually running a session on Tuesday for women who want to aim high in terms of getting on boards, whatever, if that's your measure, right? They can.
Yeah. So is there anything you've noticed in doing that work that where, and it feels stupid asking the question this way, but again, we've established the stupidity. So are there certain ways in which you see women generally, in the same ways we said about people setting out to be solopreneurs, either get in their own way in pursuit of climbing the corporate ladder, or running their own companies, or getting on boards, and things that you've seen that really help?
Yeah, that's a good question, Sam. That's like, what you're doing, interviewing people. I think one of the things is getting tied up in that question of, are they only asking me because I'm a woman? Like, I'm just not sure that that's a relevant question, really, I think.
Yeah.
As in, if they're asking you, they're asking you. And yeah, and I know this is loads of people vehemently disagree with what I'm saying now. I get that.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting it's a widely accepted view, but I just don't get that loads of guys are asking themselves, oh my God, is it only because I'm this? Maybe they are, maybe I'm wrong. So I think that's one thing, which is not getting not getting too hung up on the fact of your gender or whatever it is, whatever category it is that someone's trying to put representation onto their board of. And I would rather flip it around and think, how are you going to add value? If you've got an opportunity to do this, how do you make the most of it? What's going to be your area that you're going to focus on? So I think the most effective board members, full stop, are the ones who are clear on what they're trying to promote and what they're trying to do and what they're trying to build and what they want their legacy to be. So if you're a leader of an organization in this capacity, what are you going to leave behind you? I think is a really interesting way of doing it. And I think that gets, in my experience, that gets some of the women that I work with out of the question of it being about them being female. And I'm like, it's about what can you bring to this and what can you add? And some of that may be perspectives that are gender-based, and some things might just be insight that you've got. And I think things that hold people back are that it's this elite spaces thing, isn't it? It's spaces that you think you're not allowed to go into. And I think I see a lot of people self-selecting out. Like, I wouldn't understand that. I won't like it. I won't fit in. I won't do well. They won't get me. It's
a boys' club.
Yeah, and I was a school governor in London, and eventually became chair of the governing body. And it was a school that was incredibly diverse in an area that had some quite severe social problems. And the parents were like that. They were like, it's other people should be governing the school because, you know, I don't read very well, or I don't know how to read a balance sheet, and so we did a lot of stuff about come into the school and we'll help you, we'll teach you, and then you can govern your own area. And I feel a bit like that. And like, we need to be supporting people so that they feel they can enter these spaces, I think.
Yeah.
And not self-select out. And and women do that a lot, I think.
So this might be a really general version of the question, but is it getting better in your experience? Worse? About the same? Sort of that I guess the word is gender equality, or I don't know if it would be gender equality or gender irrelevance, or like, I don't know what the goal is. Maybe that's the question. What would the ideal be in your mind?
Yeah, I'd just go for some equality, frankly, if I'm honest. Equal pay would suit me.
Right.
I mean, seriously, like, you know.
You don't have to wink at me. I don't pay you. Maybe that's the problem.
Yeah, but, you know, I mean, in terms of gender pay gap rather than my specific, you know, but yeah, I think, I don't know. It's an interesting question. I would have said to you 10 years ago, in a weird way, I felt like we'd gone backwards a little bit. And I can't pretend that I think some of what's going on at the moment, out of the mouths of people in senior positions like presidents, helps anything around this. But I think in terms of education and opportunity, I'd like to think things are progressing. And I think if one took a world view rather than a Western view, you know, like a you and me view, if we took a world view, then I think that, you know, some of the stuff that's going on around educating girls is really, really important and going to make a difference, even if it hasn't made a difference quite yet. I think that's, you know, I'm a big believer in education as a way out of difficult social situations. And hopefully supporting people to do that is going to make a difference. So I don't know how I feel about whether it's better or worse. It is what it is, it feels like.
All right. Well, I'm going to promote you now, as I do every week on the show. You are now Empress of the Universe.
Do I have to be an Empress?
No, what would you like? Well, you get to your first job as Empress can be to give yourself a different job description.
Well, I've always quite wanted to be an Infanta, an Italian Infanta. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so I only know the word Infanta from infanticide, which isn't a good thing. What is an Infanta?
It's like I don't know really. I think it just sounds good, doesn't it? Infanta.
All right. Well, so okay, as Infanta of the Universe.
Thanks.
What would your first decree be?
That's so good. I don't know. What would my first decree be?
You can have the top 3 decrees if you I mean, you're Infanta. You can have as many decrees as you like, but I was just starting with the one.
I don't know, because my head's going all over the place around, you know, let's be nice to one another. And then I kind of thought, yeah, okay. So I mean, let's start with world peace, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. All right. So world peace, and basically, if they don't, you just destroy them with your Infanta powers, right? So okay, so we're going to kill anyone who's not interested in peace. So got that. Now that we have peace, however we established it, we can negotiate. What next?
I think I would do something like a basic wage for all. So something that allowed people to follow their real passion and gifts without having to worry about whether that would mean that they couldn't afford to feed their children themselves or somebody else. And I'm really fascinated by what people would choose to do if they didn't have this external pressure on them to do things. Like, who would choose to care for people? Who would choose to build a business? Who would choose to try and change people's lives? Who would choose to try and, I don't know, who would choose to sit outside all day and do nothing? I'm quite fascinated by that, because I feel like our choices are so influenced by the world in which we exist. So that would be, yeah, basic wage for all, that was kind of enough so that you could be comfortable, like not a kind of, you know, not a safety net, like an actual, you can do the things you need to do to look after your family and live safely. And then from there, what do you choose to do? And I wonder what that self-expressed world would look like.
Any ideas? That's because it's a fascinating thought. Like, what would people still do if they really didn't need to do anything?
Yeah, and how many artists would we have? I don't know.
Yeah.
Don't know. Yeah.
Ooh, very interesting. Well, look, should my powers expand and I be able to actually grant infantahood, don't know if that's, again, the right language. You're certainly topping the list here. I guess my last question, and then we're going to hope our producer back in studio gets us off air gently. What's the most helpful thing that you have done for yourself during this quarantine? Like, what has made the biggest positive difference for you?
Losing attachment to any sense that I should know what I'm doing, do know what I'm doing, that there is any form of right answer in any of this, and that I need to kind of drive myself to stay positive. I think just taking away all of that, just taking away any performance aspect to it. Like, you know me well, you know I have a slight competitive edge. And so and I'm normally super competitive with myself. So it's all about driving myself to do better things, do more things, do them, you know. And so losing all of that and just going, this is a big old mess, isn't it? Oh, well, do your best, that'll do.
Yeah, I mean, I talk about that as lowering the bar, but I've definitely seen lowering the bar is incredibly helpful right now.
Yeah, if as much as you can do is get up and make a cup of tea, then that's as much as you can do, and that is what it is.
Plus, it also justifies me having the dogs here and just going crazy in the middle of the thing. So it's a bit self-serving. I mean, I will admit, Michelle, it is always a pleasure and a delight to see you. Thank you very, very much for coming on.
Thank you.